when land is dropped, are buildings on that land?
No, so we're not gonna put buildings on land. We're open to maybe putting, like, if the community really wants it or
Like
something.
shacks? Like little
Yeah,
shacks for us?
we're thinking like
With some running
shacks.
water and some good food, maybe just like
Yeah,
a little
we're
garden
thinking
outside.
for the avatars and the
Shacks
uh
are reserved for Shantytown. I'm sorry,
Dang
Josh.
it, Frank. I wanted one of those shacks.
yeah. Well, this whole thing kind of ruins the game if you give everybody buildings because you don't get to create what you want. But maybe you get shack or something that gives you some level of utility. Or maybe yeah. So we have to kind of figure that out, and we're happy to have that discussion with the community. Um, I know originally we were saying there were going to be buildings on top, but this is a much better idea, I think, and it creates a lot more value because it actually
Yeah,
creates a
I
real
like it.
economy, and then also we're now backing it with wild, so any value you would have got from it's not even comparable in terms of the value. So I think it's much better this way.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
this is
what's the value of owning a building? Like help. I know a lot of people are wondering, it's like, okay, that's great. We build this building. Like why? Why do I want, if I'm just going to be playing a race car game, if I'm just going to, mine for resources, I'm going to go to combat. Like for some people, it's hard to imagine what's the purpose of owning a digital space if I'm not really sleeping in it, if I'm not really in it doing this, that, or the other. What is the value of owning a space, like a crib or a building or any of that? Why build it?
Well, I think it depends on what type of building that you want. So just from like a first person perspective in the game is obviously you'd want an apartment because that's where you park your car, that's where you have your clothes, that's where that's like your own personal space that becomes like your home within the game. And so that's pretty important from that perspective. The game's going to be a lot better obviously if you have an apartment or you have a home. So that's kind of it from a gameplay perspective. It gives you storage, it gives you a place to eat, sleep, do all the things that you're going to need to do in there. So more of like the MMO style
Hmm.
sim. And then where it gets more interesting from a business perspective is like, let's say you own land and you create a refinery. Well, you're going to be able to set a fee for that refinery, and you're going to be able to charge a percentage of every time that something is produced in your refinery or your building. You're going to be able to take a fee for that, and you're going to be able to make passive income off that. So that's a more
Fixed fee or decided
uh,
fee?
it'll be a percentage fee that gets decided. Again, it's a free market, so we don't want to set as the
So
state
we
a
can
per,
decide what that fee is.
yeah,
So there's going to be people going back and forth, like, well, they're doing 5%, I'm going to do 4%. And hopefully people will
exactly,
come to my factory.
exactly. So the idea, and will all of this stuff is experimentation, so there's going to be a lot of evolution. But the idea is to make as much stuff free markets as possible, so that uh, the state is not really having to figure these things out, which it's probably not going to do a
Yeah.
very good job at. It's either to do this, it's either to have AI or
Yeah,
it's to have,
Frank, come on.
it's either have it's either to have like the market figured out or like some form of AI figured out, but that's like more complex. So, and then like selling objects, obviously, like at each level of this pipeline, you could mark things up, and the idea was that you create a economy, the supply chain this way, right? So but in like a store, like let's say you own a commercial store, you might charge rent to a business to sell objects within that store, right? You might say, hey, it's going to
Yeah.
be X dollars for you to do this. Or maybe you're going to rent an apartment out, or maybe you build a building and you sell those apartments, right? So there's many different ways to generate revenue and to basically make money, make meow, make wild. Um, and this is all in Wild actually, because it's all inside Wilder World.
Yeah.
The way Meow works is it's kind of under the hood, and it's like the chain fees basically. But what actually enables us to have zero gas fees on Meow Chain is because we're going to have this very robust liquidity network, and that liquidity network will pay the on-chain fees. And we think that this can generate a significant amount of revenue so that the gas fees become like, I mean, and we're using new technology, so it's a layer 2 and it's using zero knowledge proofs, so it's extremely efficient. We're talking like, maybe a tenth of a penny per transaction or half a penny per transaction. So there's still a cost to doing things, but we're going
It's just
to,
cheaper. Yeah.
it's way cheaper, but what we're going to do is still pay for it because this business model, economic model makes a lot more sense, because it's like if gas fees are free, then people will do a lot more trading, there'll be a lot more commerce, and then we'll generate a lot more revenue, and then the revenue can just pay the gas fees behind the scenes on chain, basically.
So the closer to the core, right? Like you've mentioned, like for max chainers, right? They're going to be closer to the core of Little Meow or however the land is going to be. Then, like, is there a higher cost closer to that core to stake for land? So, like when the airdrop happens, will that have more wild, or is every land have the equal amount of wild in it?
Yeah, so based off of, there'll be two things. So one, there'll be two ways that this is done. So one is that there'll basically be like an algorithm to determine, based on supply and demand, what the stake fee is for that land, if you're going to activate land or deactivate land in there, right? So it'll be dynamic. So like so it'll have a starting price where we're kind of saying, hey, we think Little Meow is more valuable because that's where we're starting, and that's where all the activity is, and that's where all the energy is, and da 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 da. So that'll be in the center, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But the the that'll have a higher stake price. But like, let's say you unstake, to restake, it might cost more to restake because the value of that land may have shifted, or how we value that particular land may have shifted, and that may lock more wild in the wild in the protocol. So that's one kind of reason to not want to unstake, because if like you unstake and you take the wild out and you deactivate that land, let's say someone goes and reactivates it, or you want to go reactivate it, if the price has changed, it might be more expensive.
And if someone really builds out a great development out in some place doing their own thing, the algorithm basically would consider that a more higher value area. So it's cheaper in the beginning, but now it's more, right?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah,
Just real life economics,
max,
basically.
yeah, max chains and things closer to the better. You'll have a higher probability. It'll be probability based, but you'll have a higher
Yeah.
probability of getting better, more valuable things for max chains, basically, than trinities. But like, it's probability. Like you still have an opportunity with a trinity to get something really good. It's just that there'll be an edge if you have a max chain, basically, depending on how long the chain is.
Same with 5 chain, 4 chain, things like that.
Yeah, exactly.